Hi, my name's Kathy. I'm one of the founders and shareholders of Alpasion Vineyard in the UK Valley in Mendoza in Argentina. Our wine label tells our story. You can see here the signature and the fingerprints of all the investors on our label, and it shows it's a group of friends that got together to make iconic wine. Back in 2009, a group of us were on a course in INSEAD in France, and one evening after we'd had probably too much very good food and drunk far too much really nice wine, we had this crazy idea to set up a project to make a vineyard in Argentina. And we actually went and did it and founded Alpasion Vineyard. I'd now like to introduce you to our selection of wines. Starting over on the far left here, we have two What About Me labels, which are our entry level. So we have a Sauvignon Blanc and a Malbec. We then have our unoaked Malbec, followed by our silver label with the fingerprints and signatures of all the investors, and that's our Grand Malbec that we've made since 2011. We also have a number of different varietals in the Grand line, which include the Cabernet Franc and the Petit Verdot you can see there. We also have a Grand Chardonnay and a Grand Cabernet Sauvignon, but I don't have either of these to show you at this moment. The next one we have is the gold fingerprints and signatures, and this is our private selection. And this is a blend of wines, and the blend varies from vintage to vintage. This particular one for 2014 comprises Malbec, Shiraz, Petit Verdot and Cabernet Franc. And then the last three wines we have are all special labels. So this one here is the Lev Yashin Malbec from 2014, and it was made for the Football World Cup in Russia and was served in one of the stadiums. The next wine we have here is Old School, and this is a selection of our reserve wines blended together, and you can get it in the lodge in Argentina, and it is also going to be available in Europe. And then finally here we have our owner's selection, and this has the signature and the fingerprint of the owner on it, in this case me, and it's a limited edition wine, and it's comprised of our reserve wines for a number of different vintages. So as well as the owner's selection, we also make other private labels. So if you're considering having a private label, you know where to come to find one. So we're about to start tasting some wine. Now the first question is, does the glass matter? Well, yes it does is the short answer. And here in front of you, you can see different types of glasses. So from the left-hand side, we have a champagne glass, a champagne flute. Then we have a tulip-shaped glass, which is used for tasting wines like Sauvignon Blanc or aromatic wines. Then we have the rounded Chardonnay glass, which is for oaked Chardonnay. And then to the right of that, we have two red wine glasses, a standard red wine glass, and then a Shiraz glass, which is what's recommended for tasting Malbec. But actually, if you're tasting wine rather than just drinking it, then you should have a tulip-shaped glass. So like this one here at the end that's got some wine in it. And the reason for having a tulip-shaped glass is that it holds and focuses the aromas, which means it makes it easier to identify the different aromas. And it also concentrates the flavours, so you stand more chance of being able to tell what sort of flavours you're tasting. So that's why we use the tulip-shaped glass for wine tasting. So how do you go about tasting wine? Well, the first thing to do is to have a look at it and have a look at the colour. So get a piece of white paper so that you can see the colour more clearly. So the first thing to look for is the clarity. Is it clear or is it cloudy? Then the depth of the colour. Is it pale? Is it medium? Is it deep? And then finally, what colour is it? So in terms of white wine, is it lemon like this one? Or is it gold or is it amber? And if you're looking at red wine, is it purple? Is it ruby? Is it garnet? Or is it tawny? So look at the colours. The next thing to do is to give it a swirl to release those aromas and stick your nose in. So the first thing is, does it smell clean? Are there any faults with it? And then the next thing is to have a smell and try and see what aromas you can smell. So these could be fruity or floral, could be vegetable, and could be other things like oaky, vanilla, animal, that sort of thing. And then finally, you get to taste it. So give it another swirl and have a taste. And it's important to get some air in it so that you can get the flavours. So first taste, you want to have a look at whether it's acidic or not. Have a look whether it's sweet or dry. And if it's a red wine, you might taste some tannins. So those are the sort of grippy mouthfeel which come from the stalks and the leaves from the vines. And also with red and with some white wines, you might get some oak flavours if it's been aged in oak. So there'll be things like vanilla and that sort of thing. And then the second time you taste it, you'll then look for what sort of fruits, vegetables and other characteristics it has. And then finally you need to come to a conclusion about the wine and decide, do you think it's faulty? Is it poor? Is it acceptable? Is it good? Is it very good? Or is it outstanding? So that's the final conclusion from tasting everything. You give it your overall rating. So we've run through how to taste wine. The next thing to do is to actually get around to taste it. So what I'm going to do now is taste two Malbecs. So I have here our What About Me Malbec and our Grand Malbec. So if you have these wines, fine, come and taste along with me, pour a glass and get ready to taste them. If you haven't, just pour a glass of what you've got and taste along and make your own notes as to what it smells like, what it tastes like, what it looks like, etc. And yeah, so let's get tasting. So the wine we're going to taste now is the What About Me Malbec. So first thing to do is look at the colour. So this is a ruby colour. It's quite deep and it's quite clear. Next thing we do is put our nose in and have a sniff. So it's a clean smell. And I can smell some red fruits, so red cherry. And then we give it a swirl and have a taste. This is quite a dry wine. Medium acidity. And a little bit of tannins, but not very much. And in terms of fruits and flavours, so that's quite red fruit, so red cherry, maybe even a little hint of strawberry and a little bit of blackcurrant as well. But because this wine isn't aged in oak, you don't get any of those sort of oaky type flavours to it. So quite a very fruit forward wine. Very easy drinking. It's my go-to wine in the summer for quaffing in the garden. You can drink it on its own. But you can also it'll stand up to food as well, so maybe even with a steak and even perhaps some salmon. So in terms of rating, what do I think of it? Well, I would say this is an acceptable wine. It's very easy drinking, light wine, entry-level wine, very enjoyable to sit in the garden and quaff in the summer. So the wine I'm tasting now is the Alpasion Grand Malbec. So the first thing we need to do is have a look at the colour. So it's clear and you can see a slight purple tinge all the way around the edge, which is quite typical of Malbec. And I'd say this is a purple ruby coloured wine. Next thing we want to do is to swirl it around and have a smell. So it's got a clean nose. And the sort of fruit I'm smelling on that is blackberry, blackcurrant, dark cherry fruits. And next thing we do is to swirl it around and have a taste. So the first thing we taste for is acidity. So it is reasonably acidic, but you don't tend to notice it because it's quite well balanced. It has tannins, but they're quite soft because this wine has been aged for a little while. In terms of flavours, I can taste the black fruits coming through on that, so blackberry, but also a little bit of chocolate, a little bit of vanilla, which comes from the oak. So this wine's been aged in oak for between 9 and 12 months, and that's what gives it those chocolate and vanilla flavours. It's quite a full-bodied wine, and it's the sort of wine that you really need to have with food. It's my go-to wine for steak, so it goes really well with steak and lamb and those sort of Argentinian meats you know about. So in terms of overall conclusion, do we think it's poor, acceptable, good, very good, or outstanding? I would say this is a very good wine. It's our flagship wine and one we're very proud of, and we take a lot of care in making this wine. So this is Alpasion Grand Malbec. This is the end of the tasting session this evening, which I hope you've enjoyed. If you've got any questions, there's a chat functionality on YouTube where you can ask questions, and I might see if I can go for a live stream. I've not tried it before, so I'm not sure whether it'll work, but please join in with chat, and I hope you've enjoyed the evening. Thanks very much for joining me.